I survived Pearl Harbor. The Hawaiian air on that Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, was a silk sheet, warm and heavy with the scent of plumeria and the faint tang of salt. I was Private Thomas Tommy O'Connell, barely out of my teens, stationed on Ford Island, right in the heart of Pearl Harbor. My routine was etched into my very bones by then. Reveille, chow, and then, on a Sunday, a blessed stretch of time that felt like freedom. The Battleship Row, a magnificent line of steel giants, Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada, Tennessee, Maryland, Pennsylvania, stood proud and still, their flags barely stirring in the gentle breeze. They looked invincible, monuments to American power, catching the early morning sun like polished chrome. That morning, I was heading towards the mess hall, the sounds of distant jazz from someone's radio mingling with the squawk of gulls. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, the kind you see on postcards. It was a day for softball, for catching up on sleep, maybe for writing a letter home. Life felt simple, predictable, even idyllic. My biggest worry was probably whether the coffee would be hot enough. Then came the first sound. Not a roar, not a bang, but a high-pitched, almost mechanical whine, growing louder, closer. It was alien, out of place in the serene symphony of the harbour. My head snapped up, searching the impossibly blue canvas above. Then I saw them. They weren't American planes. That much was instantly, sickeningly clear. Their markings, the rising sun, were unmistakable, a stark, terrifying symbol against the azure. There were too many of them, swarming, diving, a metallic plague descending from the sky. And they were fast, unnaturally fast. The first explosion ripped through the air, a visceral, earth-shaking thump that stole the breath from my lungs. It was an impossible sound, too close, too real. My ears rang, and a geyser of water and black smoke erupted near the Oklahoma, a violent churning column reaching for the heavens. Shouts, fragmented and terrified, erupted around me. Air raid! Japs! The word hung in the air, heavy with disbelief and pure, unadulterated fear. I dropped to my knees, instinctively, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The ground vibrated beneath me, a constant sickening tremor. Planes screamed overhead, their engines a furious demonic shriek, followed by the terrifying whistle of falling bombs. They were dropping like deadly rain, aimed squarely at the majestic beasts in Battleship Row. The Arizona. God, the Arizona. A direct hit. A colossal fireball blossomed from our deck, orange and black, impossibly bright against the clear morning. It was like the sun had fallen from the sky and detonated right there before my eyes. Debris, huge chunks of metal and unidentifiable fragments rained down. The force of the blast knocked me flat, a wave of heat washing over me even at my distance. I could feel the concussive force deep in my chest, squeezing the air out of my lungs. The air became thick with smoke, black and oily, mingling with the acrid smell of burning fuel and something metallic, something like burnt flesh. The sky, once pristine, was now a canvas of chaos. Anti-aircraft fire stitching desperate white lines into the dark plumes, tracer rounds streaking like angry bees, and the relentless, terrifying dives of the enemy planes. They were untouchable, it seemed, weaving through the desperate defense with chilling precision. The Oklahoma was listing badly, turning over, her mighty hull slowly, inexorably, rolling towards the water, trapping hundreds inside. Screams, guttural and desperate, carried across the water, a symphony of pure horror. Men were jumping from ships, oil slicked, burning. Some hit the water and disappeared. Others thrashed, their cries echoing over the roar of engines and explosions. I remember thinking, absurdly, that this wasn't real. This was a movie, a nightmare. But the searing heat on my face, the taste of ash in my mouth, the incessant ringing in my ears, it was all too real. I crawled towards the nearest ditch, my hands tearing at the earth, desperate for any cover. The ground was littered with spent casings, and the sound of machine gun fire was now constant, raking across the island, tearing into anything that moved. This wasn't just an attack, it was a massacre, and it was only just beginning. The horror had just barely set in, but the instinct to survive was already screaming louder than any bomb. The world had shrunk to the immediate, desperate need to stay alive. The ditch I'd burrowed into offered scant protection, but it was better than nothing. Above me, the sky continued its horrifying ballet of destruction. I could hear the roar of American fighter planes finally scrambling, a small, defiant hope in the cacophony, but they were quickly overwhelmed. The Japanese Zeros were too numerous, too fast, too efficient. Their machine guns hammered the ground, splattering dirt and shrapnel. I pressed myself further into the earth, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Through gaps in the smoke and the chaos, I saw sailors on the surviving battleships fighting back, tiny figures manning anti-aircraft guns, spitting defiance into the sky, even as their ships burned around them. Their courage was a stark, brutal contrast to the helplessness I felt, pinned down, unable to do anything but witness the unfolding horror. The air grew heavy with the smell of death, burnt metal, burning oil, and something else, something I couldn't quite name, but recognised as the stench of human loss. Flames leapt from the water, fed by the ruptured fuel tanks of sunken ships, turning parts of the harbour into an inferno. The Arizona was a tomb now, her mast a grotesque, skeletal finger pointing to the sky, a testament to instant, overwhelming destruction. My mind kept replaying that impossible fireball, the sheer, unimaginable force of it. The attack seemed to last an eternity, though I later learned it was barely 2 hours. Then, as suddenly as it began, the screaming fury of the Japanese planes began to recede. The last few Zeros peeled off, disappearing into the now smoke-hazed horizon. A chilling silence broken only by the crackle of burning ships and the distant cries of men descended upon the harbour. It was a silence that felt heavier, more oppressive than the din of the attack. I pushed myself up, my limbs stiff and trembling, my uniform caked with dirt and ash. What greeted my eyes was a landscape of devastation. The once proud Battleship Row was a ruin. Ships were capsized, sunk, or burning furiously, their steel hulls twisted and mangled like toys. Smoke towered into the sky, creating a perpetual twilight. The water, once sparkling blue, was now a slick, oily black, dotted with debris, and horrifyingly, the floating bodies of men. Disbelief warred with a crushing, suffocating despair. This was our home, our base, our mighty fleet, and in mere hours it had been shattered. I saw men, shell-shocked, wandering aimlessly, their faces streaked with soot and tears, their eyes wide with unspeakable trauma. Some were trying to help, pulling injured comrades from the water, guiding them towards makeshift aid stations. The air was filled with desperate pleas for medics, with the mournful wail of sirens. I started running, not sure where, just away from the immediate scene of destruction, towards where I thought I might be useful. My legs felt like lead, but an urgent, primal instinct drove me forward. The scale of the catastrophe was overwhelming, but somewhere, deep down, a flicker of something else began to stir. A cold, hard anger, and a desperate need for what came next. The war I knew had just truly begun. The days that followed blurred into a grim, endless procession of recovery and realization. Pearl Harbor was no longer a tropical paradise. It was a wound, raw and bleeding. The air still hung heavy with the smell of smoke and despair, a constant reminder of the morning's brutality. Our routine, once so simple and predictable, was shattered. Now it was about counting the dead, tending to the wounded, and salvaging what little remained. I spent those first days on the docks, helping with the grim task of pulling bodies from the oil-slicked waters, or sifting through the wreckage of what were once proud ships. Every face I saw, alive or gone, carried the same haunted look. The easygoing smiles were gone, replaced by a hardened resolve, a chilling understanding of the world we now lived in. We were no longer just soldiers, we were survivors, forged in the crucible of that sudden, treacherous attack. News came quickly. The radio crackled with Roosevelt's solemn declaration of war, a date which will live in infamy. Those words resonated deep within me, echoing the cold rage that had begun to simmer beneath the shock. We knew then, with chilling certainty, that our lives and the course of the world had irrevocably changed. The initial despair slowly, painfully, began to give way to something else, a fierce, unyielding determination. We had been caught off guard, yes, but we weren't broken. The men around me, those who had lost brothers, friends, their ships, started to rebuild. The dry docks, once scenes of leisurely repairs, now thrummed with a furious energy. Salvage crews worked day and night, pulling sunken vessels from the harbour floor, a testament to American grit. I found purpose in the work too. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a burning desire to contribute, to fight back. We trained harder, loaded ammunition faster, fixed engines with a newfound urgency. Every action, every moment of work was imbued with the memory of that Sunday morning. We were preparing for what was to come, for the battles we knew lay ahead. Pearl Harbor had been a brutal awakening, a horrifying lesson in the cost of peace, but it also forged something new within us. The quiet kid who worried about hot coffee was gone. In his place stood a soldier, scarred but determined, ready to face the long, arduous road of war. The memory of those burning ships, the screams, the chaos, it would never leave me. It would be a constant, painful reminder of what we fought for and what we had to avenge. The war had found us, but we were ready to meet it.